Standard economic theory assumes that firms are rational in a way that they're trying to maximize their profit. So imagine if I own a business and if I'm a rational individual, I try to make my profits as large as possible. But oftentimes, students will tend to mix up the concept between revenue and profit, and they're not necessarily the same thing. So if we want to show the relationship between revenue and profit, you'll see that our profit will be affected by two major factors, including revenues and cost of production. So here profit is equal to total revenue that I make minus the economic cost. And in this chapter, we'll examine some important concepts relating to revenues, cost, and profits, and understanding them will be essential to our future studies on market structure. So today we'll mainly focus on the cost part of this equation. So according to this equation, the cost of production will influence the final profit of my macaroon business. So the payments that I receive or the revenue when I sell my macaroons don't really indicate high profits. And I have to take those inputs and resources to produce or the cost into my final considerations here. So if I want to narrow down the cost part into more different components, it would then be the sum of explicit cost plus the implicit cost. Or in another name, it includes the money payment to buy resources, plus anything that is given up by a firm for the use of resources. So to take my macaron story as an example, the money that I pay to hire workers and the wages, and also to purchase ingredients like flour, chocolate, and sugar, these payments that I make to acquire resources for use in production are known as explicit cost. And in economics, we have to consider the opportunity cost as well. So even when firms use the resources that it's owned, there's still cost or income that is sacrificed. So for instance, in the case of the store that I own, the opportunity cost can be the rental income that could have been earned if the store were to rent out to other people. Or the hours of work that I put into my own business will have an opportunity cost that is equivalent to what I could have earned if I worked somewhere else. I know sometimes it is a little bit weird to think about opportunity cost, but the idea is that you'll see this type of cost don't actually require physical payment, but it is still considered as a cost to my business, and this will be my implicit cost. So now already we have separated the cost into two parts, the implicit cost and the explicit cost. And what we'll do next is to further narrow down the components of explicit cost, or the cost of payments to buy outside resources, including land, labor, and capital. So now we can try to divide the explicit cost down into two different parts, including fixed and variable cost. So for the fixed costs, such as rent, interest on loan, are the costs that you have to pay. Doesn't matter how much output is being produced. So regardless how much macaroon that I make every single month, I still have to pay my rent, right? But variable costs are different in a way that I have to pay more when I increase my final output. So if I want to increase my macaron production, as I use more labor, water, and electricity, the business costs such as wages that I pay to workers will have to increase if my workers put into more time and energy in helping me to make macarons, right? And certainly my utility bill will rise, and other potential costs are like transportation and raw materials will also increase. So as we have already discussed in chapter 2, economists love talking about short-run and long-run condition, and we don't really define them in months or years or actual time, but we determine the difference between short-run and long-run in terms of the variability of the factor productions. You'll see what I mean. So when businesses are in short-run position, there's at least one factor production is fixed, but usually there are two, including land and capital, whereas in the long run, all variables will change. So we'll try to map out different cost curves in short run on an economic diagram today. So if we don't take the opportunity cost into consideration for a simplicity purpose, or just assuming my opportunity cost is zero, the total cost will just be the explicit cost, and that will equal to total fixed cost and total variable cost. So recall the definition of fixed cost. The cost will not change with the change in final outputs, so it doesn't really matter how much macaron that I produce. The cost of rent plus the ingredients that I buy after adding up all the other fixed costs to acquire outside resources will still stay the same. So I have to pay, for instance, $2,000 each month anyways. So you'll see this to be a horizontal curve. And how about the average fixed cost? So to calculate the average, it is simply a middle school algebra question. So we divide the total by quantity, and that'll be the average fixed cost. But the question is that how it will look like on an economic diagram. So the total fixed cost is a fixed number. And if a quantity is getting bigger and bigger, and a final average will be smaller and smaller, right? So that would be a downward sloping curve, as you see. When the quantity increases, the average value will decrease. Compared to average variable cost, average fixed cost is pretty straightforward and simple, as you see, because we have to take the law of diminishing return into consideration if we want to understand average variable cost. And we'll talk about this in our next video. So if you like this content, please remember to give a thumb up and leave a comment down below. And I hope to see you next time. Ciao.